Hi, everyone. Welcome to Rethinking Balance Sheets, a special show designed for you to understand what's happening in the world today. So let's start. Welcome to Rethinking Balance Sheets, everyone. I am Roshan Thiran. I'm so happy to be with you. And today we have with us Ravi Navaratnam from Sage 3 Capital. Ravi, it's going to be an awesome show. We're starting first time in the kickoff show of Rethinking Balance Sheets every Friday, 10 a.m. GMT plus 8 or Kuala Lumpur, Singapore time. We're going to be talking balance sheets, the most exciting topic in the world, right, Ravi? I mean, when you think balance sheets,
I think it's yeah. Roshan, I think the idea of coffee in the morning is great, but I just realized it's when you just mentioned GMT plus 8. I hope there'll be some people. If you're in London, it's midnight now, so I'm not sure the best solution.
So that one's
at midnight in London
and energized as we pour through the economy.
Yeah. For them, I think we hope we don't have them to have coffee to keep their brain stimulated. Let's hope the discussion will keep them stimulated. Yeah,
absolutely. So we're gonna show a little video now on one of the things. The topic for today is talking about, when we look at business and restructuring, and especially in these turbulent times, there is a mindset that is needed to be changed before you can transform business. So we're going to show you a short video of a summary of a webinar that Ravi and myself and a number of other Sage 3 Capital folks we did some time back, and we're going to talk a little bit more, and we're going to take some of your questions on this whole aspects of the mindset change that is needed in terms of rethinking your balance sheets, or in terms of reinventing your business to some extent, or in a more macro environment, rethinking economics. So with that, let's watch this little quick summary of a webinar that we did about a year ago.
When we think of the business cycle, you've got the launch phase, the growth phase, the shakeout state, maturity, decline, and eventually debt. But when most people think of non-stress restructuring, then what you will see is this point here, which is the company starts to go into decline, and what the business leaders will do is try to revive the business and then get it back up on the growth path, on the mature path again. What we are seeing now is this red flag here, which is very, very different. We've gone straight down into a crisis, and the mindset that we need is to go back all the way to where we were in the growth phase.
It starts with denial, and then it's followed by anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally you get to acceptance, right? So in our view, this model has high relevance when it comes to distressed businesses as well, an honest assessment of the business, and then thereafter you develop a business plan to think about, is contribution still positive in a world where demand has just fallen off a cliff suddenly, and assuming you're a price taker where demand is elastic. How can I then reduce costs? You start with marginal costs, and as I spoke about earlier, your fixed costs and so on. The next question, probably, are we facing a structural problem, or is this a cyclical problem?
When you have unknowns, right, you really need special advisors who are objective, credible, and as passionate as you over the business that you need to be consulting, right? And to be honest, these honest advisors, right, should be speaking the same language as you are. And they should be able to answer or able to help you with your business plan, tell you things, validate, invalidate your assumptions, and most importantly, right, guide you through this complex, drawn-out process to get it right? Because these advisors will help you understand legal implications, corporate finance frameworks, help you get thinking on what sort of action plan, really give you an honest assessment of the business. And what I found is that in reality, it may not cost you anything at all to call in these advisors. But what you need to do is really assess them.
Form an immediate exco that includes the MD, chief financial officers, perhaps one or two of the most influential board members. And they're entrusted with this restructuring. You cannot solve everything. There are matters that has to go to KIV. But what do? The last thing you want to do is just not respond, go quiet, right? Because if you give people the silent treatment, then they're going to get annoyed. The creditor is the de facto owner, right? And if you don't get your mindset around this, and it will cloud your negotiations, it'll cloud everything. So you got to set your mind, okay, the creditor is the owner, but I'm trying to get back this business for the benefit of everybody. And that's the whole idea of becoming a going concern.
We must not forget that they are our staff. Now, they are the people closest to us, and are also, we must appreciate, they're also going through a very difficult period. Staff will need reassurance, they will need constant engagement, encouragement, and a business will only be stable. It can only be stable if the staff are in the right frame of mind.
One thing that we are doing, we are keeping the business as a going concern, right? And when we keep the business as a going concern, it benefits all the stakeholders, the creditors included. And the key thing is we need to keep that consensus going for 24 months. And what does that take in our mindset? We must have a mindset of grit, willpower, that we can actually get to the end of this journey, right? The word wei is actually comes from wei xian, which means danger, and the word ji hui comes from the word opportunity. And the Chinese have actually got it right. They call crisis wei ji because it's both an opportunity and also a dangerous situation.
All right, Ravi. So glad to have you on our show. It's a Friday morning in Asia. It's late night in Europe. Still evening in the US. So Ravi, talk to us. One of the things when we'll get to the mindset. But before we do that, maybe to set the context of why we're doing what we're doing in this show. Talk us through what you mean by rethinking balance sheets and why this is so critical at this point for many organizations.
Roshan, if you remember when we did this thing on Monday morning, I reminded everybody what corporate finance is all about. And I think when the word corporate finance is used, you think of large corporations, etc. We wanted to remember what we are trying to do is get this dialogue to help the small and medium-sized industries, right? Really, that's businesses. That's what we want to help, right? So just to start back, if you look at a balance sheet, you got the asset side and you got the liability side. That's the funding side of the business, right? So if, for example, you've got an asset which is underperforming and you want to actually rid it off. So that's on the balance sheet. You want to rid it off. That's a disposal process. That's M&A, one of the possible large tenets of corporate finance. So that's an M&A activity. Similarly, if you think you're not generating enough cash and you think there is an asset that you want or to bring onto your balance sheet, that's the acquisition side of an M&A. And that's also on the balance sheet. So what you're really doing is you're rethinking your balance sheet. Similarly, if in terms of if you got on the liability side, you're saying, oh, my cost is high, I've got too much debt, or I'd like to reduce this. I want to bring equity to raise money to do a new plant or something like that. So that's also again on the balance sheet. So funding is fundamentally a balance sheet issue. The last part that we talked about and around reorganizing the balance sheet, which is about restructuring, that's also very much part of corporate finance. And that's, again, looking both the asset side and the liability side, bringing the assets to more realistic values. The liability sides to stuff that, we call sustainable debt and making sure that the business can go forward, it's strong enough to go forward as a going concern. So I think the idea of rethinking balance sheet is the correct term. And we're using that as a basis of this show. And hopefully our objective, as I mentioned to you, is the large corporations know how, they've got their, their advisors. The finance director is probably very competent. They've probably got a lot of advice, legal and all. But we are really hoping today that people will start calling in, especially in this crisis, to ask for ideas. Maybe, Roshan, I might not have the answer today, but we've got a strong network, not just in Malaysia, but even overseas. which we can go back. Let's write down the problems and say, okay, we'll pick it up in the next show.
Yep, absolutely. So, if you have any questions at all, if your business is going through a tough, turbulent time, and if you have any concerns on how to maintain because I think the goal is why rethink the balance sheet is ultimately to keep it as a going concern. Your entity, how if you have any of these questions, just shoot them in the comment section below, and we'll try and get to them as we do on the next 15-20 minutes as we talk about some of these things. Ravi, one of the things we talked about is the business life cycle. And I'm going to show a little diagram out here. We talk about the business, and it is a typical business life cycle, right? Because you launch a business, there's growth, there's a bit of a shakeout, or what we call the pre-scaling stage, and then you go up to a scale stage where it's maturity. There's a decline, there's crisis, and then there's sometimes what we call a turnaround that happens, where you have a recovery from that crisis or a renewal from that crisis, and you become a viable business again, or you die, right? Essentially, that's a very typical business cycle. So, Ravi, walk us through what this means in essence with COVID now, kind of decimating the landscape, so to say. What does it all mean for businesses in the world today? This whole business life cycle. And what do you think we should be thinking about as a business owner, or as a SME owner, or even as a person working in an organization, right? As you look at the business life cycle, what should we be thinking about?
Okay, Roshan, that's a great question. Now, if you look at that diagram and the one which was on the video, in fact, perhaps, if you remember what we said, in normal circumstances, you would reach maturity and then the decline begins. And that's when people start trying to recover the business. What we were trying to say in this one is, even if you were just in the growth stage, when this pandemic hit, you went straight into serious decline, very different from normal business life cycle. So it doesn't matter if you're even in a shakeout state, maturity state, even launch state. People launch businesses and they find themselves in terrible state because of this pandemic. So in that circumstances, how do we try to get back to a viable stage? And one of the things in restructuring that I think we've been very, very strong about is that we talked about if you were to restructure, especially debt side of the balance sheet, then you don't want to be a zombie. Viability means not just remaining as going concern, but the ability to raise new capital, because businesses need money to go into capital. But there is a part of a capitalist economy that companies will die, and that's part of the it's almost like speed in nature. There's things go extinct and new businesses come up. So that part of it is normal. But I think one of the things that actually, when I was watching that video, I can say something a little bit more optimistic, because, well, there are two things, right? I would say first is when we did that video right during the height of MCO last year, when everything was closed, right? And even in coming up from the Asian financial crisis, even a little bit of the global financial crisis, we did some work around that. We were really struggling to see how we would even possibly recover, because you had everything shut. And I also know Tunem went on an interview and he said, hey, this crisis, I don't know what to do, right? But I can say one thing's for sure. Again, the nominal human spirit, or entrepreneurs, we do know what eventually we get around the problem, and we begin to see how things can go. So on the one side of it, I think people talked about September, everything would be okay. September 2020, everything would be okay. Back to normal. I think now the acceptance is that this thing is going to take a lot longer. Yeah, that's one of the things. But I can also say that a lot of businesses have adapted to this to the problems, and they are thinking how to get things going. A lot more indulgence from bankers. Suddenly nobody called in loans and stuff like that. There's been suddenly policy stands to help and continue to help. That's been good. But the issue I think will be challenging is, on that viability point of view, is that I think even if you got indulgence from your creditors, the other issue is how do you get new money? And pure indulgence alone won't help, because of moratoriums, or indulgence won't help, because inevitably a lot of businesses are going to see a decline in revenue, at least for 2021, 22, before, I think most countries are talking about recovery back to, pre-crisis levels well into 2022 only. So again, businesses will also probably follow suit. So again, there lies some of the challenges. So how do we start thinking about reorganizing our balance sheet? How do we actually solve this problem? And how do we get new money into the business? And that's probably what this whole show is going to be about. Or at least first part of it, before I think we go down, hopefully next year or something, we can talk about more sexy things like M&As and stuff like that. But this is the kind of things that we hope people will join us, ask questions, and get a dialogue going.
Yep. So one is to look at the business cycle and figure out how to address some of the key issues, regardless of what stage you may be in. I guess to some extent, COVID has made almost everyone a sort of a crisis business, or accelerated the pathway towards being a crisis business. That's one pertinent issue to resolve for many of the businesses, and that has permutations in terms of your cash flow, in terms of your business pivoting, whether the business model is valid or not. But the other piece is that we find very challenging to rethink business or reorganize your business or even pivot, right? I mean, one of the most challenging things is what we call the mindset issue, right? And there is this grief stage that a lot of entrepreneurs go through, where in fact, like you said just now, right? September, everything will come back normal in September 2020. It didn't, right? In fact, it caused another stage of wave that hit in October, and we are still kind of the permutations of that is still quite resident around us, especially in Malaysia, right? So, but there's this denial that happens all the time, Ravi. People deny that there needs to be any change. And then they get angry, they bargain, they go into depression, and then they come back to denial. So it's not like you go through the stage after you finish denial and anger and bargaining and depression, you will automatically go into a stage of acceptance. It doesn't happen that way, because you go through cycles where you go into anger, bargaining, depression, denial, and then you come back and go through the stages again. What are your thoughts? And why is this so important? I mean, why is it important to go through that stage quickly and to get to a point of acceptance that this is the reality, or this is the hand that the business has been dealt, and we need to deal with it quickly? Because what would be the downside of just staying in a state of denial and just waiting and seeing rather than reacting?
Okay, I think for a lot of companies, if you get a grip of it, you do things which are not correct, because if the situation is changed, right, you must act differently. So if you're not doing the things that you need to be doing correctly, having managing your cash flows, etc., not going and talking to your creditors, etc., then you're going to get it's like you said, it's a bad hand already. Let's not make it worse. So that's basically the first thing you need to do. It's good to say that we are a huge corporation. I've never had to, but in 1998, the same. A lot of very, very wealthy people had to go back talk to bankers, and so forth. But I would say in this crisis, unlike 98, is that the good thing is, I think everybody a little bit more understanding going forward. It's not as bad. Sometimes you do get some problems, odd creditor here and there, but generally I think there is understanding that this is very, very bad. I think one of the messages that we've been telling everyone is that if we're trying to save jobs, for the entrepreneur, probably other than small medium size, for large corporations, most of them probably okay. And I think yesterday Dylan said K-shaped recovery. There's one side of society which is doing extremely well, stock markets up, etc. Investments more and more cash. And this is the whole on the bottom side, not so good. So acceptance, coming back to the question that you asked on acceptance, like most problems in life, I think if you don't accept it, just you don't get around to solving it. And it comes down to so many things that you change when you do the acceptance. The people that were fine in what was, I think, the sailing phase of the business are not the people that were, when you started in the nailing phase of a business, when you started the business. The kind of people that you need is like, the ones who were at the starting phase of business, the ones who can actually accept, handle, hundreds of problems at one go. Yeah. It's not business as usual. So they've got to go out, talk to creditors, write letters, explain to people, and then make sure the suppliers are in on, even your suppliers are probably having problems. So again, not wallowing in self-pity, but actually going out and doing something. I mean, I accept we are not in that position. I mean, we are very fortunate, and we don't face that, but we see a lot of our clients, etc., who are larger corporations, and the moment that they actually, what I can say most is, once they've accepted the problem, I can say it's 100% since 1998. Once there's acceptance of a problem and you want to do something to solve it, the end result is always good. Yeah, it's always good. It doesn't matter if you cannot save the company, right? It doesn't matter, right? But the end result is at least you can walk away saying, I've done my best, and this one, instead of just wallowed in self-pity and did nothing. So yesterday, I think we had we posted a court convened meeting on Parisa. I mean, it was a long journey, but the whole group could not be saved, and the listed shell couldn't be saved. But what we did is we saved the drilling business, which is a very important part of the business, and we saved about 70 to 80 high-end jobs. The directors stayed on for 4 years to see it through. I mean, and that's a tremendous testament to them. Their first plan didn't work. They stayed on it, kept everybody going, and then finally it's ended. But at least they can walk away saying, we've done our best. They accepted the problem. First, there was, even in that case, I think there was some issues about acceptance. I think the big challenge in Singapore when people didn't expect distress situations and said you got to pay back in full and so on. But eventually, people got around it. We did the work, worked with the creditors, the business cut costs, etc., and so on, and kept it going. And now it's being wound down. The parts which are no longer viable, but the parts viable is thriving.
Yep, thanks. We're going to continue this conversation because I think there's a lot more to talk a little about. But we'll take a very short break. And one of the things that's very interesting that is happening out there is that we have created what we call a Rethinking Balance Sheet community. And this community is going to be powered by Nicole, and you'll see Nicole's over there. And today we'll be giving a promo where you can get access to Nicole right away. You can just go to nicole.app, and download your Nicole and be able to use the promo code to get access to Nicole. So with that, I'm going to get our producer to show a little bit about Nicole in a second. So while we wait, let me just show you a little bit on Nicole. So the Nicole Rethinking Economics or Rethinking Balance Sheets community will be up and running relatively. There'll be great content on all the things we talk about, but also more from people all over. There'll be videos, there'll be music, there'll be a whole bunch of things. Will be a special group that is really dedicated to trying to understand how to rethink balance sheets, how to rethink economics. So with that, Ravi, we talked a little bit about the mindset. And it's very clear that the starting point is really about leadership, right? How do you relook at accepting the situation, accepting the hand that's given to you? But once you accept it, right, there are a couple more steps that you need to take post-acceptance, right? And I think, you kind of outline it like, okay, accept the acceptance of reality and situation as quickly as possible. But then there's a couple more steps, right? Building a team, honest assessment of the business, and action plan. Talk us through what that means, Ravi. Because I think, figuratively speaking or strategically, we kind of get it. But when it comes to getting it done, right, it's not as easy as it seems to be. So talk us through that, Ravi.
Yeah, thanks, Roshan. I think just to share with you on the acceptance phase, I mean, I always remember a client of mine who had 2 billion borrowings, right? And he always said, to me, Ravi, don't worry about it. Problems we've all got. Misery is optional. So guys, everybody's got problems, right? But misery is optional. So that's, I think
I like that. I keep reminding myself with my loans, the business loans that I have, and I'm like in cold sweat sometimes, and I'm like, problems are exist. Misery is optional. I love that statement. So I will hold on to that.
Yeah, I think what we've also seen is optimistic people are always successful. Yeah, a much better chance. We're going to go through this trouble phase. I mean, let's go with an optimistic mind. Yeah, in the end of the day, it can't be done. I mean, that's life, right? We can't succeed in every case, right? But at least have an optimistic mindset going through. And even probably on the team, I talked about the skill set. Again, I think, people who are not gloom and doom would definitely be, something I would say is important in this step. Yeah, that you don't understand. I remember during the Asian crisis, probably just too young and didn't know everything so well. So we had lunch at the Click Club with the key people at the central bank, and the worry was we're going to go into the Latin American, 10-year phase of no growth, right? Just like the Latin American countries. And better, just said, no, we can definitely solve it. I mean, God knows we had no idea how to solve it, but we just said, sure, we can solve it. So again, I think being optimistic, try to find the solutions. That's still coming back to that mindset. The team as well, I say, when you got the teams, okay, they're and I think one of the hard parts is because on the team side, the distress situation is not something that everybody knows how to deal with. And it's, like in anything in life, if you got a team, you got one player missing, you want to bring it in. Like, football teams, if, you think about it, your goalkeeper is not great, you try to bring in a new goalkeeper, or you're missing a striker, you try to bring in a striker. Same here. So if you don't have, there'll be a lot of issues on legal issues or, financial issues, you need somebody outside to bring in the help. It's something to think about. Like I said, again, coming back to what we are saying, hopefully we can be, to some extent, for a lot of people who can't, for the medium-sized companies, I'm saying central bank, or rather the government regulatory, AKPK has taken over the small debt restructuring committee. And if you got a challenge, again, go and see them. What have you got to lose, right? I mean, think about it. What have you got to lose? You've only got to gain, right? So go and see them. Yeah. Calling in, an advisor, your accountant, or your lawyer, again, nothing to lose. You do no harm talking to them. Whether you decide to appoint them, that's another matter. But again, go back. You will learn ideas. Now, even yesterday, I was listening to on BFM. There was a consultant on HR, and she was saying, large corporations have all these best practices or whatever it is. SMEs don't. But, and some may not be relevant, difficult to implement, but nothing wrong. Like, you can look at what's ever been written by us on our website and stuff like that. Again, nothing wrong in listening and then trying to find out what ideas I can accept. Yeah. So that's on the team side. Okay. Then, of course, as you get down right to, a real assessment of the problem. Yeah. You got to have a realistic assessment. Even if you accept, sometimes it's always good to have an independent evaluation of the situation, right? If it's completely not viable and you're already really in difficult points before the crisis, I think some of the things that you need to think about is if it comes down to it, then how do we manage the winding down in an orderly fashion? Even that's something better than crash and burn, right? So again, even that's a good thing to consider. And then the action items, of course, once you've got an assessment, then you can start looking at an action, etc. I think I want to say this, and okay, nobody can say for sure or guarantee how this pandemic and the crisis would pan out, but I think for sure, 2021, the vaccines will have an effect, yeah, and then as you go into 2022, they'll hopefully, most of the pandemic can be, put back, and then economies can get back to this. I understand if you're in a hotel business, it's going to be very, very tough. Yeah. Or an airline business. But again, you've got to look at the situation, and people are dealing with these issues today. So if you think you've got a tough business, think about a guy who owns an airline. He's not, crawling under the bed. Yeah. He's doing something about it.
And these are times where innovation. I mean, there is an opportunity. There's surely some opportunity out there that we will not be seeing lah. So Rev says hi to you, Ravi. Great session. Rev, if you've got any questions for Ravi, now's a good time to take it. While we get some questions coming in, Ravi, I want to just go back to this piece where we talked about honest assessment of your business, structural or cyclical problem, right? Talk us to that. I mean, how do we really do an honest assessment of our business? I mean, we have many times, I mean, especially as an SME owner myself, we tend to have a what we call a idealized or a sort of a fairy tale version of what we think the business is, not necessarily what the business is, right? But because we've invested so much, we kind of what the business we want it to be sometimes is what we think it is. And how do we really have this honest assessment, as you talked about? One is to accept, one is to build a team among strong senior managers and the BOD to accept the situation with the right mindset and not just technicals. But then we come to this honest assessment before we get to an action plan, right? How to remain a going concern. How do we do this right? What are things we should be thinking about?
All right. I think always the honest assessment comes in any organization, there's hopefully, the guy who accelerates and the other one who's cautionary, right? And sometimes at this stage, to an extent, the cautionary guy is the one who's important. So in your team, there are people who would, say it as it is. Perhaps not many people like to say probably your wife's probably a good one. Who can give you an honest assessment better than most, right? But that's the thing. So even looking at the revenues and so on, there is no perfect answer. These are not sciences, right? So but you got to realistically, I think at this stage, and you got to look at, say, revenue. What is it it realistically can do, right, on the revenue side? In all business, the heart is the revenue first, right? Then you got to ask yourself honestly, okay, that's the revenue we can do. What's the working capital we got and what we can do? So again, have a look at the working capital and say, okay, I need to keep the revenue going. That's if you got the revenue and the working capital and the operating cost side of it, that's going concern. Yeah. The balance sheet on the total liabilities is another issue, right? That's the stage one of that. Can we actually achieve that? Yeah, that's the first part of the honest assessment. Ongoing concern, I'll share with this to everybody. First is, this is a technical term. Again, I know we need to bring this show down to a level that we don't frighten, the SME owners and businessmen away. But it's something called debtor in possession, right? And that means I'll keep it very simple now. The businessman is the best person to save the business, nobody else. Full stop. Yeah, just take it. I can share with you technically it's debtor in possession, Chapter 11 bankruptcy law in US, all proven. Danahata has done huge studies on it, everything. But I think most people know, as long as you're an honest businessman, you're the best person to save the business, nobody else. Yeah, if that's the one takeaway you got today, take that home. You're the best person to save the business. So it's you who should be, leading the team, and then getting, of course, third parties to do the assessment and so forth, if necessary, to get independent view on, of the issue, so that you can decide correctly how to put the action. Even that action plan, best person is going to be the company, right? It's not going to be anybody else. Yeah. So the entrepreneur. Yep. Place. Only he's going to make terrible mistakes if he's in denial.
True.
Then he's not going to do the right thing. He is the best person, but he must get to the actions phase. Yeah.
Okay. And there's a question we have from Rav, and Rav says we are looking at the micro SMEs getting hardest hit by the pandemic, and we've seen many that went under during this period. These sectors might not be able to address their debt management properly. How do you think we can educate them properly? So I think it's quite valid, right? I mean, if you think of the micro guys, they are the guys that really are the hardest hit across the board, right? What are your thoughts, Ravi?
Okay, I think we actually looked at this some time ago. There are those which actually don't even have any debt, absolutely no debt, and they really are just running their working capital, and they've only got a savings account or current account in the bank, right? In the end of the day, on those guys. At this stage, you can't expect banks to lend, and how much can family and friends lend? I think that's why the government had relief and recovery and all that kind of pajaman and all that. But that's, in a crisis, unfortunately, the only people who can really, really help to a great extent and got the balance sheet to help, I'm talking about balance sheet, is the federal government, nobody else. And they have the ability of the central bank to actually increase the monetary base if they want to, and help. So yes, you have to run, that there is things that they can do that households and corporations simply cannot do, right? They don't own no one else owns a central bank. Only the federal government owns a central bank, so they can increase the monetary base and help them. So it's that's probably where a lot of the solutions should come from. And I would have thought policymakers would be keen to do this. I cannot, you're going to ask banks, they got obligations to shareholders, and all. It's going to be challenging to get them to do it. And we talked to the banks and said, no, we're not going to do that. That's full stop. Yeah, they'll do some things around the loans, moratoriums, and so on. But they're not going to do anything about new money, right? So new money, it is something. Yeah, sure, there's going to be always moral hazard who you give money to and what they will do. But on average, over the larger micro economies, and which are important to keeping employment and keeping people sane, etc. I think the government will gain by helping these people out more than being too worried about deficits at this stage, and fiscal conservatism.
Yeah. So I mean, and how do you think the government is doing in that accord?
No, I think there's always two sides of the coin. Again, one side of the belief is you got to keep sure that your deficits are well managed and the finances of the company is managed. That's valid option. But it's not an option I think I would have gone for. And we are a believer of Keynesian or even modern monetary theory to some extent. Those would have been the other options we should have looked at. Again, I think we can't comment on the government because, again, we don't have all the data they have, right? So they make decisions on all the information, not necessarily have all that information. So that's on the micro side. On coming back onto those guys who've got the borrowings, that part of it, I can say for sure the government, as the central bank has certainly got out there and make sure that the moratoriums continued, etc. But that, you see, that's the key point. The ones which had no borrowing, there's no savings on that cash flows from that moratorium. That's you can think of segment one. They just needed more money. They're going to feed their family first, right? So they can't keep money into the working capital of the business, right? That one, I think, again, we could have had some kind of unconventional lending. We could use, banks. They still have bank accounts, right? You could actually see how much revenue they were generating. They won't have accounts or anything like that, right? Very hard for them to have accounts or anything like that. But you'd have at least been able to see, hey, these guys, last year they were banking in so much money into the bank account. So if the pandemic got out, they could repay or something, or just give them some grants to continue the business. And the answer is probably on that side of it was a lot around grants. Or those which had borrowings, if you're a micro company, then that's fine because at least you had the savings of the loans. You don't have to pay your loans, right? And that's okay. So you've got some additional cash flow coming in, and then I think if you had certain amount of employees, the government was giving you some money as well to keep employees rather than letting them go. So again, you could have had some benefits, but those cases, I would say, post-crisis will be a challenge if they were asked to pay back all that money back with the interest capitalized, and you got a situation where you got a mismatch between the revenue side and the debt levels that you could carry. For everybody, even for large corporations, we actually go through that process and ask, what is it? Of course, for the large corporations, you can also give listed shares as settlement. Now, for the smaller companies, that's not going to be likely. And, it's something that you really need is debt jubilees. Of course, there's an issue of moral hazard. There's a moral hazard issue. But it was never really that bad in '98 from what we could see. Maybe a little bit when I was doing some work with PwC those days. I think in Indonesia it could be bad, but certainly here it was never bad. So I don't see that kind of moral hazard kind of problem going to happen. So we have to give them moratorium. And during the crisis, like I said, the only party that's capable of underwriting this kind of cost is the federal government. Nobody else.
Yep. So, fantastic. And I think we covered quite a bit of ground today on a number of things. Obviously, it's our first show, and it's the kickstart of Rethinking balance sheet. Dash wants to say congrats to you, Ravi. on the show. Dash is one of the leading entrepreneurs, so who drives number of entrepreneurship initiatives. He likes to jog every Friday evening with Kyrie. So one day we'll get Dash on the show too. So Dash, thanks for that. And what we'll do is every Friday, we'll talk a little bit about certain aspects of rethinking balance sheets. Obviously, we can't go very deep. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things, and we'll take many. We'll keep the time to take as many questions as we can. So thank you, Rev and Dash and others. There's another. This topic is definitely new to me, but I can connect the dots with the football reference, Ravi. If you need goals, you get a striker. But if you don't have a player like a number 10 to create those chances for the striker, there'll be no goals. So a manager has to really rethink every aspect of his team to ensure the right balance. But there's always the risk of it not working out. Besides doing your due diligence, is there another way to minimize that risk? So maybe we'll take this question, Ravi. It's a football-related one. So I know, Ravi, you're a Manchester United fan, right? I think, if I'm not mistaken.
No, Arsenal. Heaven forbid. But no, I said Arsenal, and
Arsenal. Okay, Arsenal. Okay, so
I'm so old that we used to support Slango.
Good.
I'm Malaysian national team. We used to be the champions of Asia, but never mind. Coming back to that, I think in terms of any business, you got to think about it. Just coming back to basic strategy, and I'm going to emphasize the point on teams, right, and people capital, right. Any company, you can replicate their processes, their branding, their spending, etc. The one thing that so far there's no technology in this world is to recreate people. Yeah, you can't recreate people. So there is really very little option outside keeping the team. I'm going to stay to my point that it is getting that right team in. It's just so critical because especially when you face for large corporations, you just not humanly possible to do everything on your own, right? So you do need to get the team to help. You need to keep the team motivated. And, in solving problems, you need people who will come and tell you a problem. You can't, if you're the kind of leader that says, I don't want to hear the problem, then it's going to be very, very hard. Yeah, you're not going to see the problem. So you need people who can speak up and tell you, hey, this is not right. As a leader, you got to make a decision on your own. That's one thing. As a leader, you have to make the decision. But you do need people to come to you and tell you, hey, boss, this is not right. Why not look at this way? And surely, 10 people with, thinking over, is better than just one person thinking. Yeah, that certainly, you got to look at the options. And, in the end of the day, why I keep saying about this entrepreneur, I'll come back to this. A lot of stuff in this world is you can't analyze, something's with instinct. Great books written on this. I forget his name, Lincoln. Yeah, and it's instinct, and it's your mind of the the entrepreneurs actually looking at many things, but it just comes out in 1 second. But there's a processing in the brain that's gone through so many issues, and he's come back with an answer. So again, I think the team has to be critical, and the other thing is make sure the businessman, the leadership. An entrepreneur takes charge of the problem.
Absolutely, and I go back to that quote: "We all have problems, but misery is optional." Love that. Let's keep our misery as an optional thing, not necessarily something. Dash is dashing back, and he says no, it's a myth that he jogs in the evening. But thanks for the mention. And actually, we have another show this evening, Tech Talk Friday, and Dash is going to be a guest together with Ram from Asia Mobility, and Afsal, the Time CEO, is going to be joining us this evening on Tech Talk Friday. So that's a little mention for Dash, who will be dashing over this Friday to our Tech Talk Friday. Ravi, this has been fabulous. I want to close with asking you, if you were to wrap up and give us one final piece of advice, what sort of advice would you give to an entrepreneurs or to give to business leaders?
Have self-belief in your business. You know it better than anybody else.
And I think that's important. Many times we forget that we know the business the best, and we kind of imagine this expert or this person or this professor will be able to help us. But really, you're right. We know our business the best. So with that, I want to just share very, very quickly. We have set up a Nicole community, right? So we have a Nicole community So for those who around, we have a special Nicole community, especially for rethinking economics. So you want to be part of that group. Understand, Nicole is an accelerator app for learning. It has guided development embedded. It's self-directed, so it's like a bit of Netflix, where you get everything from Harvard Business Review to Chief Executive to Fast Company, all integrated with 300,000 over hours of content. You get it to become a learning habit. And most excitingly is this community learning. So not just the women's community, it's Women's Week this week. So happy Women's Week for everyone. But you have a women's community, Nicole, but you also have an enterprise. But now we're having a economic or rethinking economics and balance sheets community led by Ravi and the Stage 3 team. So that's another community that will be in Nicole. So with that, with that, I want to just close out and thank everyone. We'll be back next Friday. Same time, same place, rethinking balance sheets. And if you have, you want to check out the Nicole community, go to nicole.app and be part of the Nicole community. So Ravi, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to next week, and we'll probably have a guest on the show too to be part and parcel of our rethinking balance sheet show. So thanks everyone. With that, goodbye, and we will see you shortly.
Jackie 你有捌聽啲咧叫 app 叫 Nicole 咯？
Nicole 是什麼？
唔是啦，我甲你講 app 了嘛。其實你看啲 Nicole 你看，伊加了也有真正一 article、podcast、courses 嘅啊。我甲你講啊，你愛變好命，你愛好命。
愛好命啊，定啲？
你愛趁錢無？
趁錢你咯。
啊，所以啊，你特別用 Nicole，真係講，你睇啦，你看伊 article 嘅了，睇啦，你變真搞嘅，知無？
唔嘢無，嚟我看啲。
有影你看啲 article 看安怎好命，安怎趁錢哇！哎呀，你講睇，
你一日看好你嘛，真越來越高。
對啦，甲你講了嘛，你咪聽，當今你特別去看，特別看個了，
睇個了。你講嘅真搞啦，
OK，好，你先好，來。